Thanks for joining us for a KARE 11 Recovery Inc. investigation. I'm AJ Legault. We uncovered that one of Minnesota's largest and most well-known addiction treatment providers is in a fight for survival. The state and federal government accuse New Way of providing illegal kickbacks to clients. At the same time, our investigation discovered tens of millions of dollars in questionable Medicaid billing at the nonprofit, where executives make exorbitant salaries.
Headquartered in the Twin Cities, New Way started in the 1960s as one of the nation's very first halfway houses. It now has addiction treatment centers across the state, serving roughly 1,100 clients a day.
I was in intensive outpatient treatment.
Rich LaFortune is a former client. While attending treatment at New Way, Rich lived in a sober home paid for by New Way.
If I can't have a place to safely lay my head at night, how am I going to get sober?
So for you, having that shelter, having New Way cover your housing while you were an outpatient was crucial?
Yes. I was otherwise homeless.
But that arrangement, paying for clients' housing while also billing their taxpayer-funded Medicaid insurance for treatment, has New Way's future very much in doubt.
They're looking for something.
This federal raid last summer on a different treatment provider is an example of why. In the wake of a KARE 11 investigation into alleged fraudulent Medicaid billing, the FBI raided Evergreen Recovery in St. Paul. One of the charges, illegal kickbacks in the form of providing free housing in exchange for attendance at treatment services.
What message did the Evergreen raid send to the broader recovery community?
Panic. Absolute panic.
David Glazer is New Way's attorney. The panic he describes is because Evergreen and New Way are not the only Minnesota treatment centers that pay for clients' housing. Some ended the practice, but New Way has not stopped.
Is this a hill New Way is going to die on?
Yes, because New Way feels really committed to making sure patients can get housing.
It's not a new dispute. KARE 11 discovered New Way was notified back in 2022 that they were under a still ongoing federal civil fraud investigation, suspected of using client housing as kickbacks. The Minnesota Department of Human Services also began raising concerns last February, threatening to cut off New Way's funding, but has repeatedly delayed action. This letter, dated in December, is their latest correspondence. DHS cites credible allegations of fraud, which include improperly induced services through the use of illegal kickbacks. Pending another delay, DHS says it's stopping all Medicaid payments to New Way, effective in a few weeks, February 21st. But there's something unusual about that threat.
The Department of Human Services knew exactly what was going on.
This wasn't a secret and DHS knew about it for years?
No, this definitely wasn't a secret.
That is an undeniable fact.
Safe, supportive housing is crucial to long-term recovery.
New Way made no secret they paid for clients' housing. They call it their RISE model and publicly tout providing resident support. The University of Minnesota studied New Way's RISE model and found improved outcomes. In a 2019 application for the DHS Commissioner Circle of Excellence Award, New Way directly told the DHS Commissioner in writing they offered housing contingent upon weekly treatment compliance.
After knowing about the housing subsidies for years, why is the government taking action now?
That's an excellent question. I can't answer that.
We asked DHS for an interview about the kickback claims. It was declined. In an emailed statement, DHS confirmed there's an ongoing investigation but said they cannot disclose any additional information.
So why is there so much concern about housing payments? The federal case against Evergreen Recovery provides some insight.
They got rich through fraud, kickbacks, overbilling.
Prosecutors from the U.S. Attorney's Office sat down with KARE 11 in December to discuss the Evergreen Recovery indictments.
Is there a connection between overbilling and what the DOJ calls this housing kickback scheme?
Absolutely. Kickbacks are presumptively involve fraudulent overbilling. They're an incentive to overbill.
Joe Thompson is the chief of the U.S. Attorney's Fraud and Public Corruption Section. He said he could not comment specifically on any case beyond Evergreen, but offered this general assessment.
A provider that's paying kickbacks is probably overbilling to pay the cost of those kickbacks.
Is overbilling funding New Way's housing payments? Their lawyer says no, but KARE 11 has been investigating New Way's billing practices for a year, and what we uncovered has clients responding like this.
Oh, that was happening? Holy
As part of our investigation, we uncovered internal New Way records where employees claimed they were committing tens of millions of dollars worth of billing fraud. That part of the story after the break. Welcome back. As part of our investigation, we set out to follow the money at New Way, Minnesota's largest addiction treatment provider for Medicaid patients. What we found is tens of millions of dollars in questionable billing and deeply flawed government oversight.
The journey towards recovery leads roughly 8,000 Minnesotans a year to a New Way Addiction Treatment Center door.
I received wonderful care there.
But what KARE 11's investigation found going on behind the doors of the nonprofit has otherwise grateful clients like Rich LaFortune questioning how taxpayer-funded Medicaid was billed in their name.
Oh, that was happening? Holy
Rich says at New Way, he went to outpatient group treatment in back-to-back meetings from 8 a.m. to noon.
How many hours is that?
8 to noon, that's 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 4.
His records confirm he received 4 hours of treatment, but his billing documents reveal New Way charged Medicaid for 5 hours.
That's odd. That's not correct math.
I'll be blunt.
Yeah.
Billing for 5 hours for 4 hours of work sounds an awful lot like fraud.
But they're not billing 5 hours for 4 hours work. What they're doing is billing in a way that's consistent with the instruction that DHS gave.
David Glazer is New Way's attorney. He argues the Minnesota Department of Human Services gave treatment providers unclear billing instructions and New Way broke no rules.
The government's instruction was once you cross the midpoint of a unit, you can bill a unit.
This gets complicated. Here's what we found happening.
Treatment sessions are billed to Medicaid by the hour. The rules state that in order to bill for that hour, the session must go past the midpoint. New Way exploited that midpoint rule, scheduling their treatment sessions in 35-minute blocks. So for 35 minutes of treatment, taxpayers were charged for a full hour. But then, records show New Way also double billed. Here's how. From 8 to 8:35, they'd bill for an hour. Then at 8:45, they'd start billing for another hour, double billing for the overlapping 15 minutes. That means every 4 hours of treatment, they billed for 5 hours, inflating their billing by 25%.
KARE 11's investigation uncovered internal records that reveal top New Way employees were concerned that what they were doing equated to tens of millions of dollars in fraud.
This email is dated August 11th, 2022. It's from Morgan Kluwender, New Way's Revenue Cycle Director, addressed to CFO John Marston. It says, knowing that we continue to send duplicative claims out daily, I would advise that we stop sending claims, citing the Center for Medicare and Medicaid Services definition of fraud, waste, and abuse. The email then details the double billing process and estimates in less than 3 years, they'd overbilled by $58 million. 2 weeks later, New Way's CFO Marston sends out this email that indicates they received legal guidance from the law firm Swanson Hatch, run by 2 former Minnesota attorneys general, that the practice of always billing just over the minimum required time is problematic, and they should align programming with the number of hours/units being billed. Both Kluwender and Marston declined KARE 11's interview requests, but their LinkedIn profiles show both left New Way within weeks of those emails being sent. New Way's current attorney would not comment on past legal advice. Meanwhile, Client records and state billing data show New Way ignored those internal fraud concerns and continued to charge Medicaid millions of dollars for more hours of treatment than they actually gave clients.
That is a huge red flag.
Doug Kelly is the former federal prosecutor in charge of the DOJ's white-collar crime section in Minnesota. He says federal investigators should be looking hard at New Way's billing, but DHS, which oversees Medicaid, has some major explaining to do.
Who is asleep at the switch to allow this to go on for so long and for so many millions of dollars?
That's a question KARE 11 has been asking for more than a year. Our Recovery Inc. investigations exposed how DHS approved tens of millions of dollars in questionable Medicaid payments to other addiction treatment providers without adequate oversight. After our reports, the FBI launched ongoing criminal investigations of Refocus Recovery and its for-profit partner Kairos, and the owner of Evergreen Recovery is now facing federal fraud charges.
It's simply unacceptable. It's maddening.
Governor Walz recently announced a new investigative unit to crack down on fraud in state-run programs, and shortly thereafter, that DHS Commissioner Jody Harpstead is stepping down, effective next week. For months, Harpstead declined KARE 11's interview requests, but sent a statement about New Way's billing that says in part, it's indefensible when providers use loopholes in state law to circumvent the rules.
DHS is often very obtuse and then accuses people of wrongdoing for that inability to read their minds.
New Way's attorney says for the past year, DHS has accused them of fraud, in part for billing for services not provided as billed. But the agency didn't add clarifying language to their midpoint billing rules until September, and New Way immediately complied. The rules now read, billable treatment units should not cover a previously billed time, and scheduling units less than 1 hour deprives the client of the benefit of the full unit of service.
I feel like I've been taken advantage of.
For clients and taxpayers, what was going on behind closed doors, now out in the open.
After the break, our investigation continues as we expose how New Way's questionable billing made the nonprofit's executives rich, and what we found is already leading to bipartisan calls for reform. We'll be right back.
Thank you for bringing this to us.
Thanks, AJ, for this.
This is a big deal.
At a time our state legislature can't seem to agree on anything, KARE 11's investigation exposing tens of millions of dollars in questionable Medicaid billing is leading to bipartisan calls for reform.
At the Minnesota State Capitol, New Way flags fly high. It's September, National Recovery Month, and the nonprofit addiction treatment provider is the leading sponsor of the Walk for Recovery.
And I am here today celebrating the 13th annual Walk for Recovery presented by New Way Alliance.
But like the season, at the Capitol, New Way's reception is now decidedly chillier.
Need to have their chain jerked pretty hard.
On this, GOP State Representative Dave Baker and DFL State Senator John Hoffman are in bipartisan agreement.
To see this is really heartbreaking.
They say what KARE 11 uncovered, tens of millions of dollars in Medicaid billing, done in a way that even some New Way insiders feared qualified as fraud, reveals the nonprofit, long considered a leader in the state's effort to treat addiction, broke a trust.
This is out of control, and we need to do a whole relook at the whole system, I think.
Here's what KARE 11 found happening. Treatment sessions are billed to Medicaid by the hour. The rules state that in order to bill for that hour, the session must go past the midpoint. New Way exploited that midpoint rule, scheduling their treatment sessions in 35-minute blocks. So for 35 minutes of treatment, taxpayers were charged for a full hour. But then, records show New Way also double billed. Here's how. From 8 to 8:35, they'd bill for an hour. Then at 8:45, they'd start billing for another hour. Double billing for the overlapping 15 minutes. That means every 4 hours of treatment, they billed for 5 hours. inflating their billing by 25%.
A unit is an hour. A unit is an hour.
Yep.
It's not 31 minutes consistently.
We're not talking about pocket change. Medicaid data reveals for just group addiction treatment from 2018 to partway through 2024, New Way billed more than $180 million.
Are taxpayers owed a refund based on what you've seen?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
They're not billing improperly.
David Glazer is New Way's attorney. He maintains the Department of Human Services' midpoint billing rules were vague, and his client did not bill illegally.
The instruction from DHS supports what New Way was doing.
What's clear is what New Way was doing was making the nonprofit's leaders rich. Hang outside the corporate headquarters, and you'll see C-suite executives in a parade of luxury cars that insiders say are leased by New Way. The nonprofit's tax records from 2023, the latest year available, reveal Chief Clinical Officer Ken Roberts paid more than $500,000. COO Tom Meyer paid $723,000. Most eye-popping, CEO David Venice's salary, more than $900,000 a year.
Holy smokes. You're making that kind of money as top level leaders in this operation, and we're seeing this going on here.
Citing credible allegations of fraud, DHS is threatening to begin withholding all payments to New Way effective February 21st. New Way, which has refused to make its executives available for interviews with KARE 11, recently released a slickly edited video warning of dire outcomes for all their clients if they're shut down.
So if Minneapolis wants to add people to their homeless situation, closing New Way would be a good way to do it.
Outgoing DHS Commissioner Jody Harpstead sent KARE 11 a statement that says, in part, it's indefensible when providers use loopholes in state law to circumvent the rules while using the people we are trying to help as a shield to avoid punishment. Lawmakers told us they don't necessarily want to see New Way shut down, but they owe taxpayers a massive refund. And now the organization faces its very own long walk for recovery.
They lost their way in this case.
A number of reforms are being introduced at the Capitol to explicitly crack down on exactly what New Way was doing. The big question is, what's next for New Way? Citing credible allegations of fraud, which include the alleged kickbacks and billing problems, DHS is threatening to begin withholding all Medicaid payments to New Way effective February 21st. That would effectively shut down the state's largest addiction treatment provider for low-income people. Clearly, there's a lot at risk here for some of our state's most vulnerable. With a KARE 11 Recovery Inc. investigation, I'm AJ Legault. Thanks for joining us.